was just talking to a shoot who literally 2 minutes ago who managed to get some eggs, which has been the first problem. He paid £3 for the eggs, which is
£3 an egg,
which is quite a lot, you know, given that it used to be sort of a quid or 90p, and you know, was rearing them up, and then someone offered him £19 for the poults.
£19.
So he sold the birds that he's reared up, and is now not shooting as much. And you just think, what a mad world we're in.
That's extraordinary, isn't it? So what was, presumably that was an enthusiastic shoot that wanted something to shoot, but if it was a commercial shoot, what would they have to sell those on at?
So the way it works is that returns on a shoot are usually about a third. So that's the starting point. So the price you pay for your bird immediately has to times by 3. But you're then looking at about 50% of that again on the original poult price of feed costs, all sorts of other things like that. So in this case, if they were going to sell it, and it's very unlikely that if someone's paying £19 a poult, they're going to be selling it. We have seen shoots, the highest price we saw was £89 plus VAT.
Per bird?
Per bird, which just to be clear is more than a grouse, for the first time ever. I don't know if they've sold it, or many days at that level, but...
That's what they were asking.
Yeah.
Whereabouts in the country was that?
That was down in Devon.
So, a spectacular shoot?
Yeah.
Okay, so, yeah, I mean, let's say it's the most expensive shoot in the country, that's your top price. Can you still get shooting for under £50 a bird?
So the average this year is £45 plus VAT.
Well, that's heartening, because that means there probably are some below 40.
There definitely are. I mean, there's lots of shoots, weirdly, who almost feel like, what's going on? I've got my birds, my costs haven't risen too much, I'm £2 more than last year, we're fine. And that's what's so bizarre about this season. If you look carefully, it's out there. You can find what you're after. You've just got to look really carefully, and you've got to be really quick, because I can assure you, demand for shooting generally is at the highest we've pretty much ever seen. And so we've been going for 15 years now, which makes me feel rather odd.
Well, we started about the same time, so it makes me feel old as well. There you are. Okay, so look carefully, and you will find the kind of birds you want at a reasonable price.
Yep.
One of the things you often say, which I still find staggering, is that most people, can you believe it, book their shooting in October.
Our busiest time of year, without any shadow of a doubt, is October, November. I mean, it's mad. The vast majority of shooting is booked in sort of February, March time, as it always has been. But because of the way that we just generally live our lives now, our habits are changing. Things like Airbnb make us book accommodation right at the last minute. It's just sort of filtering through into other things we do. So it gets to October, and what usually happens is people have been out once, or their mates have been out, and they meet up in the pub, and they think, oh, forget how much I love this, I'll go and book more. But from a shoot's point of view, that's really difficult. Because obviously they've got to be buying their birds earlier in the year, and this year it's pretty much impossible for a shoot to plan like that. They have to just commit and know what they're going to do.
Do shoots charge less if you book early?
No. But
so it's partly shoots' fault.
We've been trying to push this. There is a bit more sort of, structured pricing, I would say. But obviously you've got loyalty. That's always been a thing in terms of if teams keep coming back, shoots look after them. But again, I've been surprised by that. But the problem is, when it gets later on an airline, the price would get more expensive. But in a shoot's case, they can't do that because they need to make sure that they sell those days. Otherwise, they've got quite a big problem. So it should be actually ends up going the other way.
Now, this is the new Guns on Pegs research we're talking about here. How many shoots did you survey, and what were the top lines?
So, well, the key one is price. So we surveyed 700 shoots, which we estimate there's about 12,000 shoots in this country. It's quite frustrating as a community that we actually don't know how many shoots there are.
Well, there's also, I mean, my shoots, you'd barely call a shoot. I mean, it is the classic armed
But you
ramble.
just did, you said my shoot.
All right,
exactly.
it's my shoot. But yeah, it's some fields that have birds in.
And exactly.
You wouldn't call it a shoot. You're very. I know what your shooting tastes like.
No, this is not true.
You laugh at my shoot.
No, this is the thing though. Any sort of structured, walk around essentially is a shoot, isn't it? So, and there's planning, effort, all sorts going into that. There's a huge amount of care. And so, yes, there's 12,000 shoots, but when you put that, and you imagine 12,000, it's basically shooting everywhere. It's just such a huge amount. So we surveyed 700, and so the data is pretty statistically sound as it is. Pricing's the most interesting one, but 13% of the shoots that responded are already closed for this season. And this was in mid-June. So
you mean closed like not shooting?
Yeah, as in they're just packed up for this year. Obviously, it remains to be seen whether they will continue. The one thing that we're always quite upbeat and positive about is that if a shoot does decide that, or that particular manager or owner does decide to stop running that shoot, there is an endless line of people that want to take on shoots and run them.
Okay, so people who close, you'll see it reopen.
Yeah,
what,
definitely.
Do you know, did you survey or do you know anecdotally what happens to the gamekeepers in situations like that?
This is a funny one because...
not for the gamekeepers, I expect.
No. Yeah, it's an odd situation that I'm sure you've heard this. Everyone coming up and sort of saying, "Oh, lots of keepers being made redundant." We haven't really seen that yet.
I think when keepers are made redundant, you know, when Brewdog bought that estate in Scotland and made 7 or 9 people redundant, that becomes a headline and it becomes a kind of Chinese whisper. But you're saying that you haven't heard of, you know, a lot of people on the market looking for jobs.
No, and the Gamekeepers Welfare Trust, which is often the sort of place where you'd really know, are saying that it's not, you know, hugely different to any previous year, which I was really surprised by. But I mean, the thing that I would urge is that we're at the end of July now. There's a long way still to go. There's shoots doing all sorts of different things. Birds have been delivered. You know, often shoots get all their birds at once. This year, a lot of them are getting them all over the time, over like a couple of months, and that's making things difficult. So there's a lot to come out still.
I mean, it's a worry. Are we moving towards the continental practice of bringing the birds in cardboard boxes at the beginning of the day?
I hope not.
You laugh nervously. I mean, obviously, no shoot's going to put his hand up and say it is doing that. But I mean, is that? There's no law against it. It's just guns don't like it.
No, exactly. And when, you know, we can't not say it hasn't happened. And I can. When the times I've known about it happening, it's driven by just sheer pressure and last-ditch attempt to do something, and it's always very difficult. There's more to it than meets the eye, but you know.
I'm going to be a little bit damning. So I think it's also driven partly by greed. You know, it's an easy way to make a buck.
Yeah, but there's usually something that's caused it behind the scenes.
Fair
Yeah,
enough,
exactly.
All right, you'll be very good for the case for the defence there, the mitigating circumstance. All right. So yeah, you survey the 700 shoots. It's a pretty representative sample.
Yeah.
The price thing. Are you talking about that per shoot, or if you sort of average the weight of birds? Is £45 the average per bird or per shoot?
£45 per bird is the average across all the shoots, but so the cheapest is a third of the most expensive, and we've never seen that. Actually, only 2 years ago, the first time we saw the most expensive shoot being double the price of the cheapest shoot that we surveyed, and now the disparity is absolutely massive. And obviously VAT is quite a big thing. Obviously, if your shoot's turning over more than 88,000, you have to charge VAT. And 88,000 these days for a shoot's not actually that big.
It's a couple of vehicles, isn't it, really?
And so, and VAT on 50 quid is a lot.
So you're seeing a kind of leap of 20% after a certain price?
The thing with the data this year is that there's no trend anywhere.
Really?
Yeah, we're struggling to make sense of it. What we actually wonder as well with a lot of the data, and this doesn't make for sort of an interesting database document, but what we actually wonder is whether the shoots even know their own situation in the middle of June, which is really concerning.
How long have you been doing this survey?
10 years.
And if you were to look back 10 years ago, what's happened to shooting in terms of pricing, numbers that you can put your finger on and say it's this much higher or lower now?
We were £29 plus VAT 10 years ago. So
you're £45. So what are we, 1.8 times?
Yeah, exactly.
That's
a
lot.
And well, when you look at inflation, obviously inflation's topical at the moment, but it wasn't for the last 10 years. Inflation actually over the last 10 years is 10%. It's 11, 10 this year plus pretty much 1. It's way above that. And so that trend has been happening irrespective of the situation we're seeing now. So my only concern is where's it going? Because we're noticing quite a few people finding that after 2 years of COVID, this year, prices, cost of living, it's a little bit too much for their hobby. It's just testing them, and they're thinking, do you know what, I'm going to do something else.
But you're still seeing demand. I mean,
we're still seeing demand, but I mean, shooting's grown enormously. You look at Basque's membership and things like that. But I think that with the 2 years we've had and this year, I think a lot of people will stop shooting. And that's the bit that really worries me. Because we don't want that. We need as many people involved in shooting as possible in all different forms.
Now, you're saying that from an anecdotal point of view.
Yeah, it's very anecdotal. Well, we're
research.
Seeing it on the database.
Are you as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, we saw a slight drop in shotgun certificates and firearm certificates, but nothing that couldn't be explained by, you know, police forces' inability to grant them. So generally speaking, the trend for firearms and shotgun certificates is up, and it's been climbing steadily since 1997, hasn't it? So we're not in a bad place there.
Well, indeed, I suppose what I'm getting at is game shooting, because we don't know how many of that is driven by clay shooting or even simulated shooting, and there's a lot more of that going on. And this is all good. This all helps. This is all part of essentially the game fair, isn't it? But just from a game shooting point of view, I'm only saying it as a concern. And I think that what we need to look at is, when you look at your normal season, is there a way that you can maybe do things a little bit differently? Talk to your mates, maybe just do something that you might not have otherwise done. Because,
as a gun?
Yeah, as a gun. Because when you get to February, the tone is always the same. You go, oh, we had a good year this year, didn't we? And you throw all this into the mix, and it doesn't really sort of change the outcome. So I think if guns can look at what they're doing and just keep everyone on their toes and keep them having fun, because when they get together, they love it. You go out shooting to have fun with your friends. That's why people go shooting, and that's what that tells us. So I think if you can just sort of challenge each other, then, you know, we've got a fruitful future.
I have a feeling it's not going to affect my massive 20-bird days in Somerset.
No, exactly.
But, I mean, are we going to see people reaching the end of the season and having gone on a lot more walked up, hedge days, that kind of thing, and a lot less 100, 200, 300-bird days?
We will. They're in huge demand. You know, you only have to go on any form of social media and you'll see everyone wanting a day like that. The problem is that to lay on a day like that, it's quite a costly thing to have the land to be able to.
I mean, that's one of the things that shoots can do quite well. Is, you know, if they've got a spare day, say keeper is available for 40, 100, whatever it is, £200, whatever the grandest of the estate is, and you and say 2, 3, 4 guns can go out and do that.
I know what you mean, but it still costs a lot of time, effort, management. They've got to consider what implications that's going to have on other bits of ground, whatever it may be. If there's any crop they need to plant, it's not something that you can just do necessarily on a whim. And you can't, if you do, you can't then do it too often, obviously, because if you're not putting down many birds, for example, then you can't overdo it. So it's in huge demand, but we're definitely going to see a lot more of it this year.
Okay, well, I know a couple of. I'll amalgamate some stories from a couple of shoots in Cornwall.
Yep.
So let's call this a family shoot, and broadly speaking, they argue about, you know, can we afford the gamekeeper, can we not afford the gamekeeper every year? They haven't got the birds. That's going to be a problem.
Yeah.
The argument always ends up we can afford the gamekeeper, but the way to make it pay is going to be to sell a lot of little bird, little walked up days instead of a few. Off the back of the family shoots commercial days. Yeah. So actually there's a lot more supply there of walked up days, and so in terms of people going out and having a lovely time, there'll be more of that.
Yeah, I mean, syndicate shooting is the biggest sort of form of shooting. You know, a syndicate getting together, working out the cost of the shoot, managing it that way. I was just talking to another shooter as well today who they haven't been able to get any birds, but they've got a fair bit on the ground still. They're going to keep the keeper on. They're going to pay for the keeper as their syndicate, and then see what happens. And I'm sure they're going to have an amazing time. They won't probably think any different. They'll probably question why they paid so much last year.
Well, this might be it. You mentioned simulated days are a big thing, and I mean, traditionally we've seen those in the summer, and then the game days take over in the winter. We're now seeing shoots offering simulated days throughout the season. And occasionally, I mean, I've heard of at least one shoot that's doing one simulated drive, one real drive, one simulated drive. I'm not sure what to think about that. What's the trend?
I love anyone trying anything new. So I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it myself. I kind of feel like I want to go out with a sort of bit of a purpose, and I love my sim days, but then I think about it differently to a game day. Also, then you do all sorts of different ammo, wouldn't you, as well? But yeah, I love it when people try these sorts of things. But yeah, simulated shooting is increasing. Not probably as much as people think. I think it gets a bit overhyped. The figures say 6 to 7%, so it's not big. but it's definitely going up. I think actually where the biggest increases come from is a lot of the shooting grounds and a lot of the simulated setups are doing many more days, but they're getting a lot more people who don't shoot going on these simulated days.
Well, this could be a good thing for shooting overall.
Wonderful, yeah, exactly.
Okay. Duck, did you survey duck?
We touch upon it.
Nothing like touching upon a duck.
I sense you've got an angle.
No, not at all. I mean, well, there's a couple of things about duck. We had Paul Children on here. Yeah. You were on here with him on Friday morning. He has a shoot in Bedfordshire, normally a traditional pheasant shoot. He can't get any pheasants. He's got a lot of duck instead. And then there's a sort of feeling, do you want to go on a lot of duck days? Do you want to go on one duck day? You know, there was a feeling in the audience that duck days are certainly not going to replace pheasant days. And then there's another thing that came in, which is, of course, this is all caused by avian influenza. We may see avian influenza becoming such a theme throughout the season that shoots will be closed down in order to save Kentucky Fried Chicken, you know. And duck, unfortunately, are a bigger, better vector for bird flu than almost any other bird.
So I don't have the stat to hand, but there's a lot of shoots that have put down raw duck. The problem with that is that there's a lot of guns who don't want to shoot rear-driven duck. So we often see it when people sending inquiries to shoot, you know, mixed bag, and then it turns out there's a lot more duck in the bag than pheasant, and that upsets people sometimes. So, but from a shoot's point of view, if you want to get commercial about it, the return on duck's high.
Is it?
Very. You can get 70% comfortably. And so the problem then is that if you can sell the duck for not a lot less than a pheasant, that's quite a commercial venture, which I don't really like. So I don't know. That's my own opinion. I shouldn't let that get in the way too much. But
well, you can't help it, can you? Yeah. I mean, my village shoot, which takes place once a year at Christmas, is predicated entirely on the fact that if we're lucky, the snipe will be in. But we have 100 duck on the pond.
Yeah.
They never seem to need to be restocked. I'm not quite sure how we do that, but we always have, maybe because we're such terrible shots.
Do you feed it well?
Possibly we feed it quite well, yes, exactly.
Yeah,
that's right.
Exactly.
So it looks about the same, and we more or less get away with it. But we've stopped doing things like trying to shoot it twice, for example.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting one. That's going to cause a problem this year with the amount of duck out. I think from a bird flu one, it's an interesting point you make. No one's talked about that at all.
We can't call it, I imagine, but I mean, just like with lead shot, the people who want to ban lead shot are actually the people who want to ban shooting altogether, really. The people who ring the bell of doom and say, we've got bird flu, you're all going to have to stop shooting, seem to have a little halo of satisfaction about them because, they've managed to stop the whole of shooting. That, this is something we face, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously with bird flu this year, the moment you open your pens, it's a wild bird, but before it wasn't. So they then can't actually stop you straight away. And so obviously what our opponents are having a go at is the fact that there's this wild/farmed/wild, and it sort of changes the whole time. So they want that tightened up, which I can understand, but it's a wild bird. It's out on the ground, so yeah.
If they get it tightened up, they will consider that a victory. Right.
Yeah.
Your research touched on guns, didn't it?
Yeah.
On shooters.
Yeah, we find that the most enjoyable side.
Is this because it's a shooter's opinion of themselves?
Yeah, we ask silly questions like, how good a shot do you think you are?
Oh, well, should we just do a quick straw poll here? Who reckons they are an average shot? Well, oh, look at that. That's kind of good self-deprecating answer.
Who reckons they're better than average?
They're not going to put up their hands in public, are they? The good thing about your survey is it's completely private.
I'm about to tell you the stats, so yeah. Who reckons they're worse than average?
Oh, that's well
We've got a very honest audience.
You do, I know. I
so
think
what happens when people look at their
lot.
computer is they don't answer like that. 96% of guns thought they were average or better. Which is impossible. Yeah, I don't know. I suppose when you're out on a shoot day as well, it kind of makes sense, doesn't it?
Well, they all think they're gods, don't they? That's the trouble. Or goddesses. Yeah, exactly. I was at Milton's a few years ago, and I have a friend who manages to get the truth out of people. He's very good at it, and he got us to say how many birds we definitely shot ourselves and saw picked up and therefore are in the bag.
Yeah.
And, you know, we were having a jolly time and we got to something like 30 or 40 and he said, no, 8. Well done him, well done George.
Yeah,
Right.
you do that when you're standing there, don't you? You think you shot sort of a few more than you actually have.
Magnificently, exactly, throughout the day.
Positive mindset.
Okay. Did it tell you anything else about guns, apart from their high opinion of themselves?
I will resort to document quickly, but yeah, so I mean, actually, we look at the profile of the shooting community. I always find interesting because if you shoot and you've always shot in that syndicate, you've got your own picture of what shooting looks like, and if you only ever shoot on 500 bird days, you just think shooting's like that. And it always amazes me how people don't understand the breadth of shooting. Shooting's very diverse as a 55-year-old white male can be, but that's it's very diverse in that sense. So 95% male still. By the way, that's come from 98 to 97, 96, 95. So it's heading in the right direction.
But it's going to take a century
Not
to get
fast. Exactly.
half a century.
Yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
okay.
The average number of years experience of shooting, so this was 3,500 people that answered the game shooting census. 36 years? It's a lot, isn't it?
That is a lot. I mean, is that telling you horrifying things like not enough young people coming, or not enough young people filling out Guns on Pegs surveys?
Well, it tells you that when people start shooting young, they just, you know, you're shooting for a long time, and the average age is 55, so I suppose it sort of makes sense that way. 1 in 5 mostly shoot on private shoots. So
they're invited.
Yeah.
Lucky old them.
Well, it was only 70% of people even pay for shooting. The 30% is amazing.
We need more shoot security, don't we?
Yeah, exactly. 7% went grouse shooting last season. Now, grouse shooting last year was a pretty awful year, but that figure never goes above 10.
Really? So, I mean, grouse shooting is not there are only 150 moors or something, is that right?
I don't actually know that figure, but what I find interesting about this when we look into it is if you take Yorkshire out of it, because there's a lot of people in Yorkshire who pick up grouse shooting at the last minute for not a lot. If you take Yorkshire out of it, there's very few people who go grouse shooting in the grand scheme of things.
Just a quick aside, but that's one of the lovely things about living in the West Country is, especially during a kind of major stock market crash, when all those city people who are supposed to come shooting suddenly can't come, and you have to fill the day yourself. I mean, I love that.
Yeah, exactly. That's always why I've wanted to move to Somerset.
You've got to move to
Exmoor.
Somerset.
Yeah,
move
exactly.
to Exmoor. It's the best place.
Only 1 in 10 guns shoot on days with a bag of more than 250 birds.
Only 1 in 10. Now, on big bags, we get quite a lot of views about that, and I often think this has got something to do with, you know, the pernicious nature of social media, that you have people who say everything me and above is fine, everything below me morally should be banned, and in that they very often lump big bags. What's your opinion about that?
So people often get confused with Guns on Pegs, that they think that we sort of drive this desire for bigger bag shooting. I can't assure you more that that's not the case. We don't make any money out of selling shooting. I couldn't care what the size of the day is. I do care if the shoot is not meeting best practice and if it's harming the environment on which it operates. That, for me, is the acid test. We've redefined the mission and the vision of Guns on Pegs to be for a sustainable future for shooting, and we're doing everything we can to make the shoots that can demonstrate this, such as with the BGA audit. The GWCT have brought out the net biodiversity calculator. We're really going to start pushing that. I know it's testing phase, sort of early stages at the moment, but we will be able to tell, right, has that shoot been audited? It's got a traffic light system of how it looks. If it can then produce a bag of whatever, it's fine. If it's positive, it can do what it likes, providing that game goes into the food chain. So bags shouldn't come into it.
All right, but supposing, you know, you've got some GWCT heavies in the middle, and I can see them, you know, they're packing, I can see that. Supposing they go to a shoot and say, right, as part of our audit or as part of our assurance or whatever it is, we don't want to see a lot of birds. I mean, supposing that metric changes and suddenly it's tipped against big bags.
I don't think it will go down this way. I think that if the land can sustain it, the thing is that the super big bags people talk about, what you'll find is that it probably can't sustain it. But when the GWCT did the Exmoor study, and there's some really quite big shoots on Exmoor, they all came back neutral or positive.
Okay, so that was a good thing.
Yeah, awesome. And it basically shows that well, in their case, the bags that they're shooting are fine. Now, a lot of them are doing 400 bird days, and the fact that 1 in 10 guns shoot on a day of 250 birds or more shows you that a lot of people think that's way too much. But if the environment is benefiting, the economy is benefiting, so you've got social, economic and environmental impact, which is the thing we always need to assess, then why not?
Well, my massive shoot, which I'm still sure you'll laugh at, survives because it is 2 shoots away from a big commercial shoot. And I am pretty convinced that big commercial shoot has got a very few slow worms and lizards and things like that on it. But thanks to the release of birds on that big shoot, the little shoots, 2 shoots away, are able to run as shoots, so we maintain the woodland, we do all the right things, we've got all the beetle banks and all the rest.
Exactly.
So that for me is, this idea of hinterland is the best reason to have even stuff which is bad for slow worms. Sainted slow worm.
It's a really interesting point though, because when you assess a shoot on an environmental level, you're just looking at that shoot, not necessarily like an estate either side of it that maybe doesn't shoot. Because if it's putting out, what was the amount of feed we saw here? I forget how many it was, but it was tons and tons and tons. Average feed on per shoot, 27 tons. If you put out 27 tons on your average shoot, then that's doing a huge amount, not just on your shoot, but around it also. So, yeah, this environmental impact is something we really need to focus on, because I don't want the attention to be on the bag size. It's not the point. The point is, what can it sustain?